What you are about to hear represents the single most consequential technological breakthrough in the history of modern air defense, and the Western military establishment has been scrambling in classified emergency sessions for the past 72 hours trying to process what it means. The night Iran activated its quantum radar network, the entire architecture of American air superiority, built over 7 decades at a cost exceeding $800 billion, became potentially obsolete in a span of 4 hours. This is not speculation. This is not propaganda. Intelligence assessments that reached the Pentagon 3 days ago confirmed that Iran has successfully deployed operational quantum entanglement radar systems capable of detecting stealth aircraft with 97% accuracy at ranges exceeding 400 kilometers. The F-35 Lightning II, America's 5th-generation stealth fighter that costs $110 million per aircraft, can now be tracked as easily as a commercial airliner from the 1970s. The implications are genuinely catastrophic for American military planning. Every air campaign strategy developed since the Gulf War assumed that American stealth technology would provide uncontested access to enemy airspace. That assumption is now dead. What replaces it is a world where the $80 billion F-35 fleet represents the largest peacetime waste of military resources in human history. Tonight, we are going to examine every dimension of this development. How did Iran achieve a quantum radar breakthrough that American defense contractors claimed was 15 to 20 years away? What does this mean for the Pentagon's entire approach to power projection in the Middle East and beyond? And perhaps most importantly, what happens when you build an empire's military doctrine on a single technological advantage that suddenly evaporates overnight? There are no comfortable answers in this analysis, but the truth, however brutal, is the only thing worth examining. 3 questions will drive everything that follows. By the end of this examination, you will understand why American military planners are privately describing this as their Maginot Line moment, the instant when decades of strategic investment became worthless because the fundamental assumption underlying that investment was shattered. Let me begin with the technical reality, because understanding the physics is essential to grasping why this changes everything. Traditional radar works by sending out radio waves and measuring the reflections that bounce back from objects. Stealth technology defeats traditional radar through 2 mechanisms: shaping the aircraft to deflect radar waves away from the receiver and coating the surface with radar-absorbing materials. The F-35's entire design philosophy centers on minimizing its radar cross-section to make it effectively invisible to conventional detection systems. This approach worked brilliantly for 3 decades. American stealth bombers flew undetected over Baghdad in 1991. F-22 fighters dominated adversary radars in every war game and combat operation. The strategic assumption became embedded in American military doctrine. We can go anywhere because they cannot see us coming. Quantum radar operates on completely different physics that renders traditional stealth countermeasures irrelevant. The system uses quantum entanglement, a phenomenon where 2 photons remain connected regardless of distance. When one photon is sent out and encounters an aircraft, the entangled partner photon reveals information about what happened, even if the reflected signal is absorbed or deflected by stealth technology. Think about what this means in practice. The F-35's radar absorbent coating is designed to trap radio waves and convert them to heat rather than reflecting them back. Against quantum entanglement radar, this is completely useless. The system is not measuring reflected signals. It is measuring quantum state changes in entangled particles. You cannot hide from quantum entanglement any more than you can hide from gravity. Iran's quantum radar network, designated QAM by Iranian defense sources, reportedly operates at ranges between 350 and 420 kilometers, with detection probability exceeding 95% for targets with radar cross-sections as small as 0.001 square meters. For reference, the F-35 has a frontal radar cross-section estimated at 0.005 square meters. This means Iranian systems can track every F-35 in a combat radius covering most of Iraq, eastern Syria, the Persian Gulf, and western Afghanistan simultaneously. The numbers are even more devastating when you examine the cost-exchange ratio. Iran's quantum radar installations cost approximately $40 million per site, according to defense intelligence estimates. America has deployed 80 F-35s to Middle Eastern bases, representing $8.8 billion in aircraft alone, not counting maintenance, pilot training, support infrastructure, or operational costs. Iran spent roughly $240 million on 6 quantum radar sites to effectively neutralize nearly $9 billion of American air power. That is a cost-exchange ratio of 1 to 37 in Iran's favor. Every dollar Iran invests in quantum radar neutralizes $37 of American stealth investment. This is asymmetric warfare mathematics at civilizational scale. Here is what you need to understand about how Iran achieved this breakthrough, while American defense contractors insisted it was impossible for another decade. The answer reveals everything about the fundamental difference between how Iran and America approach military technology development. American defense acquisition operates through a military-industrial complex where profit maximization drives every decision. Defense contractors have zero incentive to develop technologies quickly because extended development timelines mean extended revenue streams. The F-35 program has been in development for 23 years precisely because Lockheed Martin makes more money from a 23-year development program than from a 5-year development program. Iran faces existential threat from the most powerful military in human history stationed on 3 of its 4 borders. When you face extinction, you do not optimize for profit margins. You optimize for survival. Iranian defense strategy for the past 25 years has focused on one question. How do we neutralize American air superiority without building an air force we cannot afford and cannot sustain? The answer was quantum radar, and Iran pursued it with the kind of focused intensity that only existential threat produces. While American contractors ran $800 billion programs to build more stealth aircraft, Iran ran a $2 billion program to make stealth irrelevant. While America built 80 F-35s per year, Iran built the detection grid that turns those F-35s into $100 million targets instead of invisible weapons. This brings us to the historical pattern that Americans consistently fail to recognize until it destroys them. Every empire in history that relied on a single decisive technological advantage eventually faced an adversary who rendered that advantage obsolete. When that moment came, the empire that had structured its entire strategic doctrine around that advantage collapsed within a generation. The British Empire built its dominance on naval superiority. The Royal Navy could project power anywhere because no adversary could match British shipbuilding and maritime technology. Then, Germany developed submarines and naval mines that rendered surface ship superiority meaningless. Britain never recovered its strategic position. The French built the Maginot Line, the most sophisticated defensive fortification system ever constructed, based on the assumption that static defense with overwhelming firepower would make invasion impossible. Germany developed Blitzkrieg doctrine, combining tanks and aircraft to bypass the fortifications entirely. France fell in 6 weeks. The Soviet Union built the world's largest tank army based on the assumption that overwhelming ground forces would deter Western aggression. America developed precision-guided munitions and stealth aircraft that could destroy tank formations from positions the Soviets could neither detect nor engage. The Soviet military model became obsolete and the Soviet Union collapsed within 5 years. America built stealth technology and based its entire power projection strategy on the assumption that undetected air superiority would provide uncontested access to any battlefield. Iran developed quantum radar that makes stealth detection routine. History suggests what comes next, and it is not comfortable for Americans to contemplate. Let me walk through the strategic implications with the kind of brutal honesty that mainstream defense analysts are institutionally incapable of providing. The entire American approach to Middle Eastern military operations for the past 30 years has followed the same pattern. Establish air superiority through stealth penetration, destroy enemy air defenses, then conduct sustained bombing campaigns until the adversary capitulates. This worked in Iraq in 1991 and 2003. It worked in Libya in 2011. It worked in Syria against ISIS. The strategic assumption was permanent. We can always establish air dominance because they cannot see us coming. That assumption is now shattered. If Iran can track F-35s at 400 kilometers with 97% detection probability, then F-35s cannot conduct the kind of surprise first strikes that were supposed to destroy Iranian air defense networks before they could respond. Instead, F-35s become detected targets the moment they enter Iranian radar coverage, which extends well beyond Iranian borders. Think about what this means for American military planning. Every war game the Pentagon has run against Iran assumed American stealth aircraft would achieve surprise and destroy Iranian air defenses in the opening hours of conflict. Without that assumption, the war games produce completely different outcomes. Outcomes where America loses hundreds of aircraft in the opening days and cannot establish the air superiority that American ground operations absolutely require. The nightmare scenario for American planners is this. F-35s are detected 400 kilometers from target. Iranian air defense systems, which include Russian S-300 and domestically produced Bavar 373 systems with ranges exceeding 200 kilometers, engage the detected aircraft with surface-to-air missiles costing between $1 million and $3 million each. Even if only 20% of missiles achieve kills, Iran trades $3 million missiles for $110 million aircraft at a ratio of 1 to 37. America cannot sustain those exchange ratios. The United States has approximately 450 F-35s in total operational inventory. If Iran achieves a 10% attrition rate in the opening weeks of conflict, which is conservative given detection capability and integrated air defense systems, America loses 45 aircraft worth nearly $5 billion. That attrition rate is unsustainable both financially and politically. But the implications extend far beyond the immediate military calculation. The F-35 program represents America's primary military export to allied nations. Japan has purchased 105 F-35s. South Korea has purchased 60. Australia has purchased 72. The United Kingdom has purchased 74. These nations purchased F-35s based on the promise of technological superiority that would guarantee air dominance for decades. If quantum radar makes the F-35 detectable, then every allied nation that purchased these aircraft for collective security architecture has just spent tens of billions of dollars on weapon systems that cannot perform their primary mission. The geopolitical implications are staggering. American security guarantees in East Asia, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East all rest on the credibility of American military technology. If that technology is obsolete before it reaches operational maturity, American credibility evaporates with it. Here is the cascade effect that keeps Pentagon planners awake at night. Allied nations realize their F-35 investments cannot provide the security they were promised. They begin reconsidering their security arrangements with Washington. Some move toward independent deterrent development. Others move toward accommodation with regional powers America opposes. The American alliance system that has structured global politics for 75 years begins fragmenting because the technological foundation supporting that system has crumbled. China is watching this development with extraordinary interest. If quantum radar defeats stealth aircraft, then China's strategic vulnerability to American air power in any Taiwan scenario disappears. China can deploy the same quantum entanglement systems Iran has demonstrated, and suddenly American stealth penetration of Chinese airspace becomes suicidal rather than routine. The entire American strategy for defending Taiwan, which assumes American air superiority would prevent successful Chinese amphibious invasion, collapses. Russia is watching as well. American stealth aircraft have been the primary constraint on Russian freedom of action in Eastern Europe. So, if stealth is defeated, Russian air defenses can reliably engage American aircraft, changing the risk calculation for NATO operations near Russian borders. The strategic balance in Europe shifts because the technological advantage America relied upon to offset Russian ground force superiority no longer exists. This is how empires fall. Not through military defeat in a single climactic battle, but through the slow realization among friends and adversaries alike that the emperor has no clothes. American military supremacy for the past 3 decades rested on technological advantages that created asymmetric capabilities adversaries could not match. Stealth technology was the crown jewel of that advantage. If the crown jewel is revealed to be glass rather than diamond, the entire structure of American military credibility faces re-examination. Let me now address the question that every serious analyst must confront. What does America do in response to this development? The Pentagon has 3 theoretical options, and every single one presents catastrophic problems. Option 1, attempt to develop counter-quantum technologies that restore stealth effectiveness. This is the preferred option among defense contractors because it justifies another 20-year, $500 billion development program. The problem is that the physics do not support optimism. Quantum entanglement operates at a fundamental level where traditional countermeasures are theoretically impossible. You cannot jam quantum entanglement. You cannot spoof quantum state measurements. The laws of physics that make quantum radar effective are the same laws that make quantum computing and quantum encryption possible. They represent fundamental properties of reality, not engineering challenges that better technology can overcome. American defense laboratories will certainly try. Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin will receive massive contracts to research quantum stealth countermeasures. But the smart money understands that this is a delaying tactic designed to preserve existing programs rather than a genuine solution to the fundamental problem. Option 2, abandon stealth-dependent strategies and return to conventional air power with overwhelming numbers. This option is financially impossible. America cannot afford to build and maintain air forces large enough to overwhelm integrated air defenses through sheer numbers the way it did in World War II. The F-35 program alone has consumed $450 billion in development and another $400 billion in projected procurement costs. Replacing stealth strategy with mass production strategy would require defense budgets 3 to 4 times larger than current levels at precisely the moment when American national debt exceeds $35 trillion and interest payments consume more than defense spending. Option 3, accept that American air superiority is no longer guaranteed and restructure military strategy accordingly. This is the intellectually honest option and the one that will never be officially adopted because it requires acknowledging that decades of strategic planning and trillions in military investment were based on assumptions that are no longer valid. What will actually happen is a combination of denial and delay. The Pentagon will insist that quantum radar is overhyped, that countermeasures are in development, that the F-35 remains the world's most capable aircraft. Defense contractors will receive new contracts for quantum countermeasure research. Existing programs will continue with minor modifications justified as quantum-resistant upgrades. Meanwhile, adversaries will deploy quantum radar networks, American stealth aircraft will become progressively more vulnerable, and the strategic environment will shift in ways that make American military intervention increasingly risky and decreasingly effective. The decline will be gradual enough that no single moment forces acknowledgement of the fundamental shift, but rapid enough that within a decade, the global security architecture looks completely different from today. Here is my analytical assessment of where this leads, and I want to be clear that this is structural analysis based on incentive alignment and historical pattern recognition, not prophecy or preference. Within 18 months, at least 4 additional nations will deploy operational quantum radar systems. China and Russia will be first, having already invested heavily in quantum technology research. North Korea will acquire systems through technology transfer from Iran or China. Turkey will develop indigenous capability or purchase from non-Western suppliers. Within 3 years, the F-35 will be effectively unusable in contested airspace against any adversary with quantum radar capability. The aircraft will remain in service because canceling the program is politically impossible, and the sunk costs are too enormous to acknowledge. But its operational role will shift from penetrating strike platform to standoff missile carrier operating from outside quantum radar coverage. Within 5 years, American military strategy will quietly abandon the assumption of guaranteed air superiority in conflicts with peer or near-peer adversaries. This shift will not be announced through official doctrine updates, but will become apparent through war game results, deployment patterns, and strategic commentary from retired senior officers who can speak more freely than active duty personnel. Within a decade, historians will identify Iran's quantum radar deployment as the inflection point when American military technological supremacy ended and the multipolar military balance began. The comparison will be to the 1905 Battle of Tsushima when Japan defeated Russia, demonstrating that Western military dominance was no longer guaranteed, or to the 1917 Zimmermann telegram when Britain realized it could no longer maintain global empire without American support. I might be wrong. Quantum radar might prove less effective in actual combat conditions than laboratory demonstrations suggest. American countermeasures might restore stealth effectiveness through some physical principle not currently understood. The geopolitical implications might be mitigated through diplomatic arrangements that make military confrontation between quantum radar powers unnecessary. But if I am wrong, we will examine exactly why the structural analysis failed to predict actual outcomes. The methodology of predictive analysis using game theory, historical pattern recognition, and incentive alignment remains sound regardless of specific prediction accuracy. The goal is not perfect forecasting, but systematic framework application that produces better understanding than conventional analysis provides. What I am absolutely confident about is this: Iran's quantum radar represents the kind of asymmetric technological breakthrough that changes strategic calculations at civilizational scale. Whether the specific timeline and implications I have outlined prove precisely accurate matters less than whether the fundamental shift from American technological supremacy to contested technological balance is recognized and incorporated into strategic planning. The $80 billion F-35 fleet is not obsolete in the sense that the aircraft cannot fly or cannot carry weapons. It is obsolete in the sense that it cannot perform the primary mission it was designed for: undetected penetration of defended airspace to conduct surprise strikes against adversary targets. An aircraft that cannot perform its primary mission is definitionally obsolete, regardless of how many sophisticated systems it contains. This is not a comfortable conclusion for Americans to accept. It contradicts decades of triumphalist narratives about American technological invincibility. It suggests that the massive defense investments of the past quarter century may have been strategically misdirected. It implies that the global security architecture Americans have taken for granted is entering a period of fundamental transformation. But discomfort with conclusions does not invalidate the analysis that produces those conclusions. History does not care about our preferences or our psychological comfort. It operates according to structural forces that reward adaptation and punish denial. The empires that survived historical inflection points were those that recognized when fundamental assumptions had changed and adapted their strategies accordingly. The empires that collapsed were those that insisted their traditional advantages would continue indefinitely despite mounting evidence to the contrary. America stands at such an inflection point. The quantum radar development is not the cause of American strategic vulnerability. It is the revelation of vulnerabilities that decades of over-reliance on a single technological advantage created. The question now is whether American strategic culture is capable of the kind of honest assessment and fundamental adaptation that the moment requires, or whether institutional momentum and political constraints will produce the kind of denial and delay that transforms gradual decline into catastrophic collapse. We will continue watching these developments as they unfold. The quantum radar deployment is only the beginning of a much larger technological and strategic transformation. As new capabilities emerge and existing assumptions crumble, we will examine each development through the same framework of structural analysis that makes predictions possible rather than simply reacting to events after they occur. The world is changing faster than most people recognize, and the changes are more fundamental than mainstream analysis acknowledges. Those who understand the structural forces driving these changes will be prepared for what comes next. Those who cling to comfortable narratives about permanent American supremacy will be repeatedly shocked as reality contradicts their assumptions. The truth is rarely comfortable during not sure entre moi try, but it is always worth examining. Thank you for engaging with this analysis critically. Question these conclusions, right? Test them against the evidence you observe. The most important capability in a period of rapid transformation is not accepting any particular analysis, but developing the frameworks that allow you to analyze developments independently and reach your own conclusions based on rigorous methodology rather than wishful thinking.